Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we will be looking at this Excel sheet. Well, it's a Google sheet actually, but whatever. Which I made where I have added the properties of different cards commonly used in Nami and kind of to compare their ability to mill. And yeah, so first I guess let me explain these columns. We have like, well, the name and an image and the ID, and then the dawn and effect dawn cost. So like crocodile here, his effect cost 1, and then we have the when deals damage dawn cost. So basically some effects or some cards have the when you deal damage you get an effect, but you have to pay or attach a dawn for it to work. So like the Belmare and the Usopp, the Rush Usopp. And yeah, then we have other stuff like power, hand trash cost, and so on. But I guess the interesting things are here we have the on play or the main, the number of draws and deck trashes, and then self bottom decks. And then we also have the search count, so that's how many cards a card can search for. And yeah, other stuff like counter, how many you get to draw when you use it as a counter, and the trash. On KO effects, like how many cards you draw or trash on KO. Activate main, draw and trash, mainly for a hanger, I guess. When attacking effects, for like OP09 Nami and Cavendish, and then when deals damage. So if we have attached on to get the effects, how many cards will you trash or draw? I mean, I don't think there's any card that you can draw with when you attached on and a deal damage, but maybe there is. And then trigger stuff also. So I've basically added all of this information manually for each card. This is not every blue card, as you can see. It's just cards that are generally used or like has potential to be used, I guess, in Nami. Like I don't think Kaido is really used very much, but it happens. And it includes cards up to OP10, so you can see I have the Cavendish here, and then of course all the classic events commonly used, all the way down to Love Mellow. So yeah, next let's look at the analysis for mill that I made. So in another tab here, mill analysis tab, I have basically compounded or like added together different properties of the cards to kind of get a rough idea of how well they can be used for milling. So this first is here on play and mill. So this is basically when you play it or on your turn, or yeah, use the main effect, how many do you get to draw or mill. So mill I consider to be draw, hand or deck trash, or search. So like a search can miss, of course, but assuming you build your deck somewhat, like taking that into account, you can often expect to find a card when you search. But you know, there's probabilities and there's chances, and so maybe I will make a video about that, how to calculate the probabilities, but that's not for this video. But I mean, the same can be said about like the on-play effects, right? You can't guarantee an on-play will work, because if you're playing against Blackbeard, Teach, he could use the effect black hole is it called, I think, that stops on-plays. So then like Kaya can't draw, right? So then right now Kaya has 2 as mill, which I mean generally that's what we can expect, right? But it's not always, right? So this is, you know, take this with a grain of salt. This is not the end all be all number, right? It's mostly like something to start to go off of. And yeah, then we also have to forget that many cards have like an additional cost, right? The app is you have to trash 2 from your hand. That is not cheap. And maybe you cannot always do that, even if you can pay the down cost. So this is not like a fully extensive analysis, but it's a, you know, somewhere to start. But anyway, we have also the counter mill, which is basically how many cards you mill if you use it as counter. So Deathwink can draw up to 2, so that's what we have here. And then on KO, yeah, if the card is KO'd, then how many cards you mill. So like Boodle, I guess, is one example, and Belmare another one. Activate main mill, yeah, if you use it as use the activate main attack or ability immediately, you get to mill a number of cards. Then we have when attacking. So for example, the OP09 Nami counts as 1 here, because like I said, we assume the searchers will hit, even though it's not always true. And Cavendish also is 2. And then when deals damage mill, yeah, so this is like a special case because it can be hard to make sure that you can deal damage, especially for the minimum down cost. So like in theory, Belmare can trash or mill 7 for just the down cost plus for the card, and then 1 down attached, right? So that would be total 5 down. But generally, you can't assume that you will hit with just 1 down. So we have this as its own column. But you know, in theory, like if your opponent is empty-handed, you know, you can be pretty sure that she will hit, and you can get a lot of mills. So then I have kind of compounded all these different types of mills into basically one number, which I call the single turn mill. So that is basically if we play the card and we assume the effects happen except for the damage, because the damage is special, right? Then how much is the total mill, right? So for a Boodle, we assume his on KO will trigger, like we assume he will die. It's not always true, right? But generally we can assume that's true if we play him. Then we get to mill 1 card, right? And then we have the single turn mill per dawn. So this is basically the number of cards we mill divided by the dawn cost. So we can kind of see how efficient the card is for milling, right? So Boodle, again, if we take as an example, his cost is 2 dawn cost, and he mills 1. So 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, right? It's half. And then the next one is the damage. So we take the damage case separate, because like let's look at Belmare here, for example. She has a cost of 4, and she has an on KO, which will trash 3. So assuming so we see here the single turn mill is 3, because we assume that the on KOs will trigger, which will give her a single turn mill per down cost as 3/4, or yeah, 0.75. But if we also get the damage effect, then in total we will mill 10, right? 3 plus 7. And we have used a total of 4 plus 1 dawn. So the mill with damage per dawn cost will be 2, because 10 divided by 5 is 2, right? So that's how this is calculated. But obviously that's a very optimistic scenario, you know. Usually we can't count on that. I would say the single turn mill per dawn cost is probably what we can expect usually, but not always, you know. Every game is different. You have to take each scenario on its own. But yeah, so this is what I have done for each card. Now I've kind of tried to put it all together into some, I wouldn't say simple diagrams, but at least you don't have to look at each card individually, right? You can kind of follow the curve. So here we have all the cards, and I have now sorted it by single turn mill. So basically how much mill you can get in a single turn from one card. And it doesn't take into account the Dawn cost or anything. And then we can see here Kaido, OP05 Kaido, right? He's a 10 cost that draws 4 on play. If you have like 3 or less. If your opponent has 3 or less life, I think. Let me double check this. Kaido. Draw 4 cards if your opponent has 3 or less life cards, yes. And yeah, that's the most you can draw with one card, basically. And assuming nothing else. And the next is Belmare, which, as we said, as we saw before, on KO, she will draw. She will trash 3, so that's mill free. But of course, there's possibility for more. Next, we have Kaya, and then Giant Gavel, and then Murder at the Steam Bath, and Deathwink, and Sandy's Pilaf. Which, I mean, all of these are at 2. So 2 is kind of like pretty good, but I guess what we can expect in a good scenario. But yeah, this is not taking into account anything about the Dawn cost. So this is basically like if your last card is if you only have one more card, you want it to be Kaido, right? Assuming you can get the on play effect. I mean, actually, you might still want it to be Sandy's Pilaf, because Sandy's Pilaf can draw into other cards that you can use. Like a Pilaf into a Pilaf that will also draw 4, but you still have 4 Dawn over. So, you know, it's not that simple as, oh, one card means Kaido. But it is the most we can mill with one card. So next, if we take the Dawn cost into account, now it's starting to look a bit more what we would expect. So Kaya is the first, like obviously, if we play Kaya, she costs 1, and then we get to draw 2. Of course, we still have to trash 2, but if we look into pure mill, then Kaya is the most optimal. I mean, together with Gum Gum Giant Gavel. But remember, Gum Gum Giant Gavel also costs another card, and that is not really showing in this graph, but something you have to take into account. Also, I mean, sometimes you want the Gavel instead of the Kaya, right? Because maybe the Gavel can save you from a hit, which will allow you to take another turn, which will make you draw a card, which effectively means it mills free, right? Because you trash 2 from your deck and then you draw 1. So it's all about the context or the scenario. It's not as simple as, you know, this card is better than that card, which is better than the next, and so on. You have to take everything in the correct scenario. And next we have a bunch of cards that have one mill per Dawn. So that's Murder at the Steam Bath, the Buggy Searcher, Usopp's Rubber Band of Doom, Apis, Gloriosa, and Nami. So these are also commonly used and highly valuable per Dawn, at least. So if you want to mill as much as possible in one turn, these like 7 or so cards, 8 maybe, are what you want to use. Like if you're on the last, if you only have a few cards left and you want to make sure you can draw mill as much as possible, you know, play your Kayas, keep your Gavels, but you have to make sure you can you have cards to trash, use your Murder at the Steam Baths, use your Buggy Searcher, Gloriosa Searcher, Apis, if you have enough cards to trash, like you have some extra Impel Down All-Stars or something. And then we have the OP09 Nami Searcher. Now this is a bit misleading, I guess, because this is not something you want to use late. when you're just trying to draw your whole deck, because you have to wait one turn until you can attack with Nami. So she doesn't really help for winning at the end. And yeah, then we have other cards. I mean, also we have to keep in mind that even though, like here we have Snake Dance at the bottom, right? So it will mill 0. But that's not really true, because if we use a Snake Dance to pick up a Kaya, effectively we can consider the Snake Dance as two cost to draw a Kaya or pick up a Kaya, and then 1 cost to play a Kaya, which is basically like you pay 3 Dawn and you draw 2, right? Because you wouldn't be able to play the Kaya unless you use the Snake Dance first. So that would put the Dawn, or mill per Dawn, at 2/3, right? 2 divided by 3. So Snake Dance, that's why we still use Snake Dance a lot. But yeah, on just pure card, this is how it is. Next, let's look at if we are able to deal damage. Then some cards get to mill a lot, and especially we have Belmare here, which, as we know, has the on KO mill 3, right? And then the when deals damage mill 7. So she can mill up to 10 in one. I call it a single turn. It's not actually a single turn. It's basically your own turn plus 1 attack, right? With your character. Because often you can't really expect, but you can hope that your character will survive at least one turn, so you can attack with it. But after you attack, of course, it will be rested, and then it's very likely your opponent will attack into it if they think it's a threat, which Belmare is likely to be, unless they think they can counter out. So yeah, that's my point, right? Everything is very context dependent. But yeah, next we have Zeph, the OPO3 Zeph. He has I think if I remember, he can trash 2 on play, and then he has also the trash 7 when you attack or when you deal damage. So he's number 2, and then Rush Usopp has 0 on play, but it's kind of on play, because when you play him, you get to rush, right? Or he has rush, and you can immediately get the damage. So I mean, there's a reason many people play Usopp over like Zeph and Belmare, but with the way I'm doing in the analysis, it looks like the others have more potential in a single turn. But take everything into its correct context. And then we have others like Kaido, Kaya, Giant Gavel, and so on. So finally, let's look at how much mill, if we take the Dawn cost into account, but we assume we can get damage in. And then again, we have Belmare at the top, right? Because as we saw before, she can mill up to 10, but the total cost will be 4 for the card plus 1 for the effect to deal damage. So that's 5, right? So that's 10 divided by 5, which is 2. Which is the same in theory as Kaya, but I think almost every Nami player would say Kaya is a lot better than Belmare. Even though technically they have the same kind of damage or mill per Dawn cost. But that's, like, again, it's the best case scenario for Belmare, so it's not really comparable. And then we have Gum Gum Giant Gavel. So again, we see like play Kaya and Gavels if you're trying to win, because they will mill the most for the least amount of Dawn. Next we have Zeph. So even though Zeph can mill up to, we saw here, up to 9 cards per Dawn, it's actually worse than Kaya and Gavel. So he's not that effective, I don't think. And then Rush Usopp is next, and the other cards we saw. And again, don't forget that these cards at the bottom are definitely not useless, even though they don't mill directly, because they can lead to other mills. So it's basically, you need to think that there is kind of an effective mill for each card, and it's not as simple as the number it says on the card. Maybe that's something I will discuss more in a future video, but in this video I just wanted to discuss each card's individual capabilities or properties. Okay, so here we have a game I played like a few days ago that I recorded, and in this game, now I want to kind of commentate over from a perspective of optimal milling from a mill per don perspective. Now, obviously, if we even go back to the first turn, I had a Kaya and a Nami, right? So technically the Kaya would have higher mill per don, but obviously there's no point playing it first because we can just use it later. And if we use the Nami first, there's a chance that we can save it and we can get more value out of it if we attack with it once. Now I wasn't able to save it this turn, but I still got to use a white snake just to draw, which also is important to remember, that you don't have to save your character just to get value from your cards. You know, you can use a white snake just to draw instead of drawing and saving it. And now we have a bit more dawn, but it's still not really time to focus on milling out of the deck, right? There's still a lot in the deck, but technically, like, to do the highest mill per dawn cards in the deck, in my hand currently, are the Gavel, and next is the Rubber Band of Doom, and then I guess the Peel Off would be next. But here we get to see the example I showed before, that I talked about before, that we used the Snake Dance to bring back the Kaya. So now, if we play the Kaya again next turn, or at some point in the future, we have used 3 Dawn to play a Snake Dance that allowed us to play another Kaya. So, in some sense, that Snake Dance, the effective mill per Dawn, was 2 mil for 3 Dawn. So yeah, like 0.67, right? And what I'm doing now, I guess, I'm still not at the point where I'm trying to mill out. I'm just trying to kind of control the board a bit and making sure I don't take too much life. So still looking good. And now I can try to save the Nami, which I do. Maybe that was wrong because I didn't get to draw from the Lava Beam. So that's another thing we have to remember, right? Some cards have an extra requirement. So even though in the Excel sheet or the Google sheet that I made, it says that the Lava Mellow has a mill per dawn of 1 divided by 2, so 0.5. In reality, that's not always true, because sometimes you don't fulfill the requirement of having 3 or less cards in hand after you play it, which was the case this time. But I did get other value because it forced my opponent to attack into my Nami, the OPO9 Nami, which has value also in some sense. It's not as clear what kind of value, but it's still, because for each turn we survive, we draw 1 card, right? So basically, using a counter, that allows us to survive 1 extra turn, is basically like milling 1 or drawing 1, except it comes maybe it's something that kind of affects the later game more, or it's less visible compared to like playing a white snake and drawing directly. But these are the things you have to remember. So now we're getting to the point where, I mean, the deck is still too big to be able to mill through. I mean, I guess the most you could mill in 1 turn would be like playing 4 Kayas and 4 Gavels, which is what? 8 plus, so 16, and then maybe plus like 2 Rubber Band or something. So that would be 18. So I mean, that's also not very likely to ever really happen, but I guess that would be like the max that you can expect ever. So until we get to at least 18, that's when we don't really need to start worrying about trying to focus on milling out. But now that we are below 18, it may be time, but still, like here I can choose between, I guess, Level Up Mellow and Gavel. If I wanted to mill, which apparently I didn't want, I don't remember. But if I had to choose between one of those, then the Level Up Mellow would allow me to draw another card, which could be used to mill more, right? The Gavel would immediately mill 2, but the Level Up Mellow could draw into another card, maybe another Gavel, which would I could use, which would allow me to mill more during the turn, or I guess it would be next turn, because you cannot use the counter the Level Up Mellow on your own turn. You have to use it on your opponent's turn. And now we see in my hand I have a Marguerite, 2 Mellows, and 1 Gavel. So if we just count the total amount of mill in my hand right now, it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2, which was 6, or 5, sorry. But of course we have to remember the Gavel requires another card to mill. But the Level Up Mellow, they draw cards, so we can actually count on drawing into something we can trash for the Gavel. And now that we're getting close to the end, or I mean close to the end of the deck, yeah, it's important to focus on making sure we play the cards that, I mean, we don't have to play to draw too much, right? We have to draw until we are milling exactly. So we shouldn't focus only on drawing or milling, but we also shouldn't focus on like just milling and then we are like 2 cards short. Right? So you have to do a bit of math to find out like what is optimal. And now I have 7 in hand or in deck, and I have a peel off and 2 Marguerites and a Gavel. So I think I was able to win without drawing the second peel off. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I wasn't. Whatever. I got there in the end, and I managed to win this game. Now it's not like I planned it to be exactly like this, but you know, if you try to. But if you play at least having this in mind when you're playing, then at the end you can kind of hopefully get the win. But yeah, that's all I wanted to discuss in this video. I hope maybe you learned something or found something interesting, and I will share the Google Sheets, so you can take a look at that if you're interested. And other than that, I hope you have a good day, and bye!